Now we're ready to build out the front-end app, and the first place we'll start is in the index.html file. When working with Vanilla.js, you have to think carefully about how you structure your HTML, because ultimately you'll be using your JavaScript to grab these various DOM elements and manipulate them in different ways. What we're building here is just a simple UI where a user can type into a form input, which will make a request to the API and show a loading state, and then when the image is complete, it will render it in this placeholder here. So just going through the HTML from top to bottom, we first have a div with an ID of result. This is where the image will appear. Then right below that, we have a form that has a single input of a text area, which is where the user will type in their prompt. Then below that, we have a button with type submit that will submit this form to the server. And that's all there is to it for now. The only other thing I want to point out is that notice how the script tag for the main.js file is at the very bottom of the body tag. You'll want to make sure that it appears here because you want it to run after all the HTML is rendered. Now in the main.js, I'm first importing the style CSS file. I'm not going to cover CSS in this course, but feel free to copy my code from the source code or come up with your own styles. Now the first thing I want to do in this file is grab the form from the DOM, which we can do with document query selector form. What we want to do is listen to when the user submits the form by clicking on that button, and we can do that by adding an event listener for the submit event. We can then define a callback that runs whenever this event takes place and gives us access to the event data. I'm also making it an async function so we can use the await keyword inside of it. Now normally when a form is submitted, it refreshes the entire page. However, we want to prevent that default behavior, and we can do that by calling event.preventDefault. Now once the form is submitted, our next objective is to extract the data from the form, like the prompt of the image description. We can do that by instantiating a new form data object using the form as the input. This provides us with a data structure that behaves like a JavaScript map. And now we're ready for the fun part, making a request to our API. JavaScript has a built-in function called fetch that makes this process very easy. What we'll do is point the fetch function to the localhost 8080/dream URL. It returns a promise, so we use await, that will place the value in this response variable. It takes a variety of options, and most importantly, we want to make sure it's using the HTTP method of post. We're also dealing with a JSON API here, so it's a good idea to set a header with a content type of application JSON. Then finally, we need to define the body of this request with the form data. We'll want to wrap it in JSON stringify to make sure that it's converted to a string, then define an object that has a value of prompt, then grabs the prompt value from the form using its get method. This chunk of code will make the request to the API and then give us a response with the data, including the image URL. We can access that image by awaiting the response JSON. Now that we have the image, we need to insert it in the UI. We can do that by using document query selector to grab the result div in the HTML. Now we can modify its inner HTML with an image tag where the source is this image URL. And with that, we should have a basic working prototype. Let's go ahead and open it up in the browser, try typing something into the prompt, submit the form, then the image should eventually update in the UI. That's pretty cool, but there are a couple of issues that we need to address here. One of which is that there's no loading indicator to let the end user know that the API is working on generating the image. That might cause them to resubmit the form multiple times. So we should add some kind of loading indicator. The other issue is that there's no error handling. If you try to enter a prompt with a bad word like Donald Trump, it's going to reject the request. So we should provide some feedback in the UI for the user. We'll take care of those things in the next couple videos.